You're tuned in to RX Radio.
I know that I'm white trash because deep down inside, there's not many things I love more than a Zin and a Coke Zero as like an afternoon snack.
You know, I gotta say, you and I don't know if there's a person on this planet I've gone out to dinner with more than you.
Yeah, I think I'd agree.
This may be the first time I've ever seen you with the old DC or the old Coke Zero.
It's a relatively new thing because actually, here's how this happened. Recently, I stopped using nicotine, and it brought me a lot of joy. And then mid-afternoon, it's not like I'm going to have a coffee and just stay up all night. So I needed something to bring me joy in the time between coffees that wasn't nicotine. So I started drinking Coke Zero. And then I realized it's really fucking dumb to not use nicotine because nicotine with a Coke Zero is fantastic. It's like the intermediate before I smoke a Marlboro and have a Yingling. Like I'm not quite there.
Just quickly, for those following along at home and myself included, what the fuck was the second thing you just said? Marlboro and what?
Oh, man. So a Yingling lager. It's, Canada, you guys have you have Drake and you have Justin Bieber. Well, Pennsylvania has York Barbell and Yingling lager.
Okay, so it's like world famous in the world of PA, and it's some type of alcohol.
Yeah. It's like an amber beer.
How expensive is said? Because here's the thing: growing up, Americans that don't know how good you got it. Like, how much would 24 when you were a kid? How much would 2.4 a beer cost?
We would. Man, me and my friend Donovan would each pitch in $5, and his sister would get us a 24 case of the shittiest beer.
Okay, so the fact that we're the same age, like almost down to the day, you could not get a case of beer. You maybe at one point there you could get a case of beer for $24 at one point, and that's dollar beer is like something that's labeled as honey that doesn't taste like honey. That was like where you were at. You were drinking. Fuck, I don't even remember. Laker, maybe Max Ice, bad, but like you're paying $24. You're earning it. The fact that you could get, I'm assuming 12 beers at one point in your life could get you drunk.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That you could do that for $5 and you still have a brain cell left to your name is actually incredible.
That's why. Thank you. Yeah, that's.
You could have been a brain surgeon. You could have been a brain surgeon. I mean, the fact that you had a peak at all, you weren't just a flat line, like quite literally. Yeah,
touch and go for a minute.
Interesting. So the Coke Zero is your newfound joy.
Yeah, Coke Zero and a Zin. I think that's like maybe in the 80s or 90s what like a glass of scotch and a cigar might have been. This is like the new age version of that. Or the poor person's version of that.
You're a sophisticated man. You're a sophisticated man. I'll give you that. Okay. Interesting. The evolution of your health habits has been really fun to watch through the lens of the podcast. Because it's those of you who weren't on air at the beginning of this. It started with me hearing a can opening. And now usually we've gotten used to the Zin pack being the ceremonial opening ceremonies of the podcast. Right. But this was a new edition and I couldn't see what it was at first. And I'm like, oh boy, this could be anything. I was actually surprised that it was only a Coke Zero.
Yeah. I'm willing to make this a segment of the podcast where the viewers just get to watch my what's the opposite of evolution? Like de-evolution?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go with that. Devolving.
The devolving of my health habits.
Great. Yeah. I like that. I got a bunch of drugs I might start doing before the podcast.
I think we should bookmark a day to do that and just see what happens.
I'm gonna tell you, I got a DMT pen. It scares the shit out of me.
Have you used it yet?
No, it's sitting in a cupboard over there. I can't take myself to go down that road.
Yeah, I don't know where that road ends.
I don't think it does. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Everyone I've ever talked to who's gone down that road is still on that road.
Yeah. mind expansion.
I got a road. I got a bunch of stuff I got to do along the way. I got to run errands on my road. I can't be veering off into some other road that ends in the desert somewhere in Peru or whatever the fuck. It just, yeah. So maybe that'll be the last podcast we ever record. We'll just rip the DMT pen and go to Mars.
That'll be wild. Wow.
I mean, not that there's a way to transition eloquently into what I wanted to talk about today, but I think there is something. The podcast as a vector in this industry has massively evolved over the course of the last 10 years, as so far as we've been paying attention to it, right? So we started the podcast back in 2016, give or take. So we're going on to, we're going into year 10 starting next year. And back then, there was a feeling, I had this feeling, I'd be curious of your take on it, that we were late to the game. That we, Mind Pump, friends of ours down the street, they'd been in the podcast world for a little bit. Barbell Shrugged was, I would say they were peaking right around the time, historically, if we were to look back at that. You and I were on the show early days of RX Radio, which was a really, really cool experience. But maybe that they were on their downslide where they started picking us as guests. But there was a feeling that I had when we started that it was a fuck it, we'll do it anyways. But it was a feeling that like, oh, we're gonna do a podcast, like it's kind of played.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. It seemed like it was something unattainable. Like the people that were podcasting, which looking back on it isn't 100% the case, but the ones that I was listening to at the time were people that had already earned their credibility and were like, kind of like we say all the time, is like, we just talk about the shit that we do. And they're like people that had a story to tell. And frankly, at the time, it seemed out of reach to become, a well-known, respected podcast because of the people that were doing it. And it seemed like it was such a, it just didn't see, it's like trying to start your own TV series or something. Like they have producers, they have, cameramen, they have all these lights and everything. And we started like the lowest of low budgets. I think you kind of mentioned that on the last one we recorded. So like getting into it, I think for me, it was a really good outlet. I assume so for you as well, because I just had shit to say and I didn't know where to say it or who to say it to. And having the podcast was nice in that regard, that it's like, all right, these are my frustrations with the fitness industry, the training industry, the chiropractic rehab industry. And it just gave me a place to say them. But I honestly never thought that we'd be here 600 episodes later, still doing this and still, having people like I trained with one of our level 3 coaches today, Elliot Harris, and he was telling me how he listened to our early day podcast. And that still blows my fucking mind, dude, because we were just a couple of fucking angsty kids right out of school just yelling into the internet.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it did feel experientially gate-kept. It felt like, because it was, for me, it was really kind of Barbell Shrugged was the main one on my radar. I'm trying to think of who else I would have listened to.
I listened to Barbell Shrugged and another guy, Ben Bergeron, who was like big in the CrossFit space.
Yeah. I know the name. Was he the running guy?
No, that was Hinshaw. Bergeron had a gym it was called New England CrossFit. And a lot of the games champions early on were coached under him.
Yeah, because it did seem like you had to do something. And I think that's where the evolution kind of came in. Now it doesn't seem like you have to do anything, right? Like there's just, and this is where I think when we, for the 30 seconds before the podcast, decided about what we wanted the podcast to be on. And we kind of both agree that providing value as a trainer was a good topic to touch on. I think the podcast space is a really good proxy for the evolution of the evolution / integration of the digital space into into personal training, right? The personal training coaching. Like the story of podcasting and its evolution is it runs adjacent to and in some way a part of the evolution of the online coach. And I think at its core, they share similar tenets when it comes to value. Even though now you don't need to, podcasting isn't experientially gate kept. that you can just be a podcaster, you can just create content, and that can be enough. People forget that adding the real story to it, although not necessary for entry, may be necessary for at the very least catalyzation of your business, right?
Mhm.
So like talking about stuff is great, and everyone's angsty about everything, right? Everyone's got an opinion, whether it be validated or valid or invalid. Everyone has one. But what experience is what's going to validate that? And I think one of the things that I see a lot in, because it can be a potent vector for growth and a potent vector for value, but it's almost like currency. And trust is, currency is trust, trust is currency. And if you're accruing social capital, if you're accruing followers on the internet, what that is an indication of trust. Right? We've talked about this before, that your following count is almost, it can be seen, and not directly relative to this, not directly in relation to this, but it can seem like you're like what you're trading at from like a stock ticker perspective. It's like, oh, there's a lot of trust in Berkshire Hathaway because Warren Buffett's going to make a bajillion gazillion dollars for everyone. That's why the share price is like 75 grand a share. But it's like, what backs up currency, or what used to back up currency? It was gold, right? It was a thing that you could go to and you could pick up and you go, all the trust that I've accrued is backed by this thing that sits in a vault. Your experience as a coach is the gold that backs up the trust that you accrue through social media channels. And if your experience, it's almost like people are propping up experience in the same way Bitcoin is propping up value, right? It's like, it's just kind of all up in the ether, right? It's like, it's valuable if people say it's valuable, where it's like, well, gold, at least it's finite, right? Gold standard. And I think when it comes to our field, the gold standard that backs all of the trust that you accrue is your experience. And I think if you're looking to use, things like social media, podcasts, Instagram, whatever, to portray more value or give more value to the people that you follow in hopes that it advances your business, that has to be backed by something. And it has to be backed, in my opinion, by experience and finding, things that you want to do to push forward that file into that category of experience. Like for us, we kind of glass over the fact, but I think it's very useful to, not as a point of differentiation, but as a point of reference for people to be like, hey, we're still doing this 10 years later, because we started a podcast. We felt like we were late. We felt like we were gate kept, but we also went to school for a really long time and did a bunch of shit, went into a bunch of debt, learned a bunch of crap, forgot most of it, wrote a bunch of tests, paid a bunch of money, got this like title, right? So that's something. That's something that we can stand on. And so when we make a claim, there is a inherent trust that comes with that. That's backed by the experience of us going through, 9 years of school and coming out at the other side. So like, as much as we not look down, but we go, yeah, man, it was really tough to get started. We had something backing us. Further to that, we were both in some sort of competitive strength sport, right? You were leading the way. Like, you started getting into CrossFit competitively before I did. I think I remember the day I decided to do my first meet, and we trained together at sundown. And I was like watching you compete in CrossFit. I was like, fuck, that looks cool. I'm not swinging from fucking bars or whatever the fuck you were doing or running, but I was like, okay, I'm going to compete. You kind of like convinced me. And so that started backing our experience. And I think it's a question that's fundamental to the success of trainers, especially now, because there's two things have happened over the last 10 years that I've noticed. One, that creators have become more abundant, right? Like, I got a new lighting setup here. I don't know if you can tell. I'm sure I fucked it up.
You look great, man.
Lundy, thank you, man. Thank you. I'm sure Lundy will tell me how bad a job I did. But, I was just talking the other day about how most people wouldn't even think twice about creating content without a 4K camera or without, these microphones or whatever. Back in the day, man, I still got a shared folder on my phone of me and you sharing from like an iPhone 5C. You could kind of get away with it, but it's like just as content creation has become more abundant, I think the market for consumption has ran away with it. Like there's way more of a market for consumption than there is a creator pool to fulfill that, right? So, but I think when at the consumer level, consumers have gotten smarter, and it's a weird relationship, because as the consumer pool has expanded, which I think to at a rate far exceeding the creator pool, they've also gotten smarter at the same time. And rarely does quality and volume scale together. So here you have an audience that there's more of, that is also a little bit harder to sell than they were 10 years ago. And I think what they're looking for is, what is your experience that backs the value that you bring and the trust that you're trying to accrue? And that's where people need to focus. So it's like, you can look at the hardware, you can look at the software, you can ask about, posting times and these arbitrary metrics that people will discuss. But it's like, ask the deeper question: what experience do I have that backs the words that I'm saying, so that my trust is substantiated? Because that's really what people are looking for. And you wonder why, and people get upset with, the bodybuilding does one show and turns into a coach. And it's like, look, you can bitch and moan about that all you want, but those people have clients, because there's at least something that they can point to that goes, well, this experience backs the trust that I'm building. And I think if people spent time focusing on that, how their experience can substantiate the claims they make and help build their trust, the rest of, and I'm not going to say the rest of their business concerns would kind of fall the wayside. But I really think that's primarily the first domino to fall for most people. And it's where they want to spend the least amount of time attending to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with all of that. I think trust is the biggest thing, especially if you have a service that you're trying to sell, right? You have to give someone a reason to believe that they can trust you in getting them to where they want to go, or else they're just not going to hire you. And for me, the thing that bridges the gap between experience and value is it's results, and not just results, but the amount of time you can get results in. And that, to me, boils down to value. Either you can get better results in the same amount of time, or you can get the same results in a faster amount of time. And that's what people are paying for, right? Because say, I don't know, someone injures their knee. They can decide to not pay me to help them with that knee injury, and they may get the same results, but it's going to take them longer to get them because they're not as accurate. They don't have the experience to guide them in the decision making along the process of getting that knee to feel better, or training around that knee injury so that they can get back to doing what they want to do in a reasonable amount of time. But history tells us that injuries heal, right? And probably there will be a point in the future where they no longer have pain that inhibits their training. Maybe not. Or maybe they'll just get to the point where they can train to a capacity they want to without having full results. But in choosing to hire someone, that's now saying, I'm going to pay you for your experience to get me results in a faster amount of time than I would have gotten otherwise. Or they trust that you can get them the results faster than the next person, or the person after that. And that's what experience is, because I have positioned myself in a way where I work with people that have injured their knees, and I've worked with hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that have injured their knees at this point in my career. So it's not only do I know how to get someone with an injured knee better and back to training, I also know the things that they don't know are going to hang them up along the way. Or, say an example of that is, okay, you have a knee injury. Most people's first reaction is, okay, I'm going to rest for 2 weeks and then I'm going to slowly resume the things I've been doing. Okay, maybe that works for some people. Maybe it doesn't. But I know that in the past, like, okay, if we can get you to continue to train but we can work on things that don't involve your knee, but we can equate for all the things that are going to create compensations in that amount of time that you're still going through life, moving, maybe even training, maybe not, in the amount of time while the knee is injured. And if we can reduce the amount that we're compensating or bolster stability through the hip and the core in the meantime, that 2 weeks from now, when that's out of an inflammatory phase and we can start to load it, we're going to be much further ahead as opposed to had you just rested for 2 weeks. And that's the experience that people are paying for to get better results in the same amount of time or the same results in a faster amount of time. And that's where you add value as a trainer, is because yes, maybe someone, they've done one bodybuilding show and now they're a coach. Okay. They have a limited amount of experience in which they can help someone through some of the things. And this is also something that I think about often, is that I've been doing this for so long. Sometimes it's hard for me to relate to someone that hasn't been doing this as long as me, right? And that is the benefit to being a coach that is a little bit more fresh, a little bit more green, is that the frustrations that someone runs into when they're very new to this are a lot more present to you at that time than they are to maybe me or you that have been doing this for consecutive decades now. So there's a bit more of that, we can call it sympathy or empathy around these things that people are going to run into when they are less experienced, or kind of the mindset of someone that doesn't have as much experience, that's just doing this thing for the first time as well. So not to discredit them because they don't have a vast amount of experience where they're not able to predict, the 10 things that will go wrong in this process, but they are very able to relate to some of the things that are very present in someone's mind who's going through this experience for the first time. So not necessarily to discredit them and saying that, more experience, you should always go with the person with more experience, but it does come down to the idea that you need a level of experience to be able to help someone through this in an expedited way. Or I guess an asterisk by this is you have to be really good at problem solving really quickly, because I've been in situations, and I am still constantly, where I maybe don't have the exact experience someone's looking for in some whatever they're hiring me to do, but I have a lot of experience in that realm and a lot of things that parallel it. So I have a really good way to solve problems really quickly when they arise, so that even though maybe I haven't dealt with this exact thing before, when something pops up, I have 3 different options of the way that I want to approach it, and I can quickly switch from one to the next to see if we can get progress in that area, which still does come down to you need reps. You need reps in the problem solving. You need reps in the communication. You need reps in getting buy-in. You need reps in getting trust from your clients. And those are the things that actually give you a shot to start to gain further experience.
Yeah, because I think there's two things. As if we're centering in on value, I think there's two things that I want people to take away. One is do what's necessary, because there's one of my I'd say it's a favorite quote. It's a quote I use often. It's from one of the James Bond movies. I think maybe it's Spectre, where every James Bond, there's like these characters. There's like M, and then there's so she's like the old lady, and there's a Q, which is like the person who handles all of like the tech stuff, right? So Bond is sort of known for having these crazy devices. In this movie that he meets, I think it's I forget, either the Museum of Natural History. They meet somewhere in London, and he meets this guy who's really young, and he's like Q, the quartermaster. He does all like the tech stuff for Bond, and he sits down next to Bond, and they're like looking at this big painting, and Bond doesn't know the kid sitting next to him is this quartermaster, the guy who does all the tech, and so he indicates that he is who he is, and he kind of looks at him and goes like, "You still have spots," like a euphemism for like you're super young. Like, why the fuck would I listen to you? And he says something to the effect of, age is no sign of experience and youth is no sign of innovation. They have this little exchange, very British banter. Like, he looks at him and he goes, age is no sign of experience. And then Bond looks back at him and he says, youth is not a sign of innovation. So just because you're young doesn't mean you're innovative. And he's like, just because I'm young doesn't mean that I'm not experienced, right? Because I see people who are experienced at a young age, like you and I, done a lot in our 35 years, especially in the field. And it can be difficult to have people recognize that, because most people are like, well, and this is something that I've noticed even with the volume of shit that you and I have done, that there's a passive trust and value that comes with seniority, right? Like, I think we've done a lot to earn some sort of status as authorities in the space. We have the track record to prove it, but there's a certain level of trust that comes with seniority, but you only get seniority as if you stay in the fucking game, right? And I think that's part of it. And I think one of the things that's helped us accelerate in the accumulation of both seniority and authority is we tell the story of our experience. And I think that's been the cool part about the podcast is like, yeah, we have career experience and we've done stuff, and we have other platforms where you can see like work that we've done and people that we've worked with, but we have this 600 episode black box of the last 10 years of our practice, right? And it's like, it's a tale of the tape that alongside this thing, and this is where I think coaches miss on either end. They miss on telling their story, and then they miss on doing the things that allow the time to be valued appropriately for the experience that it should represent, right? Because like, I've been in rooms and I've been teaching people who are in their 50s and 60s, and there's been no growth. They're still going off of the same thing they learned when they just did a PT course, whatever, 30 years ago, and there's no upgrading. And man, we've been in rooms with kids that are like young Saluji, Jesus, he was like 17 years old, ripping like 700-pound deadlifts and starting Istanbul street fighting groups in the middle of COVID. And we're like, how old is this kid? And he's 17 years old. It's like, fuck, okay. Like, here was a dude that was doing both things, I think, really well. He was acquiring the skills for every minute to be as potent a unit of valuable experience as possible. He was in labs. He took L1. He was learning from people who were far senior and concepts that were far advanced for his years. And he bit off what he could chew, and he chewed like fucking crazy. And he went back in for more. I think of a dude named Luca Webb from Australia. I don't think he's fucking 20 years old yet. If he is, he looks real young. But like, works with muscle nerds. Flies out to fucking Singapore to come to an event. Like, is just doing all of the things. It's like, dude, by the time you're 25, if you keep this pace up, your 6 years in this is, again, time is such we said this before on a podcast. It's a vehicle for experience. And if by 25 your CV is 50 pages long, the only way you're going to struggle is if you don't tell your story, right? But you have all the experience, because I think most people I know that are fighting to find ways to provide value to their clients aren't doing both of those things. And you have to do both. You need to be fighting tooth and nail to find the opportunities so your years mean something, that you can look back and be like, I've done this, 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 and I've done that. And you got to get out of your own fucking way and stop being like this pure, like, look, when it comes to purist and training and the history and the sanctity of lifting, I'm right there with you, right? Like, all the old heads, the Louis Simmons, the Dave Tates, the Paul Quinns, I get it. I get like the trepidation with recording yourself in the gym and do it. And it's like, look what all those guys do now. All of those guys have bent a knee to the necessity of storytelling so that they can provide the value. Like, I love what Dave does, because it's what is it? It's lift, learn, and pass on. Right now he has a podcast. The Under the Bar podcast is probably one of the biggest podcasts in the health and fitness space. Why? Because it's someone who's done so much telling those stories. And I think when people are running an inventory over their business in this field or the service they provide, filter it with those two things. And if you're looking to partake in activities that help build your service, build value, understand those two things. Am I doing enough in real life with the time that I have, connecting with people, training people for free, getting opportunities to build status, getting in the rooms? And then on the flip side of that, am I telling the story? Am I telling the story about how I'm doing those things? Because if you do both of that, that's how you start to accrue meaningful trust. Because not only will you have the backing, like on paper, but you'll also have the backing when it comes to the rubber hits the road. You'll run into these situations where someone goes, just like you were saying, like, yeah, have you done I'm trying to think of something really obscure. We had an athlete that had a MCL, ACL, medial meniscus, fractured tibial plateau, and ruptured gracilis tendon. One play. Have I dealt with one of those before? No, I haven't dealt with knee Armageddon before. Like, what the fuck? How a ruptured gracilis tendon in one play with a triad? Like, no. But have I dealt with enough knees that we'll figure it out? Fucking rights, we'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. Because I put myself in situation. And I think there's a last piece I want to put on this, and that's price. Because it's not, I don't say it's easy to talk value, but value and price, and we'll bring up Warren again. Warren Buffett's famous for saying, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And look, in the early stage, when I started coaching online, better part of 10 years ago now, I charged nothing. Sometimes quite literally nothing, and sometimes relatively nothing to what I charge now. And why? Because I was green in both of those things, but I was actively working towards it. And this is where I think people who provide a lot of value struggle. One, because they don't tell the story, but two, they don't let the price tell the story for them either. Right. And I think, like, look, I remember increasing my rates when I went from working at Apple to working at Stanford. Prices went up. Right. When I went from every year, my prices went up because I was actively doing shit in that year. I was well aware that, like, me competing in powerlifting, going to meets across the world, starting to do seminars with you. I remember the first one that you and I did together at NorCal CrossFit. I don't even remember that. In fucking Redwood City or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That would have been 2004, 15.
Probably, yeah.
16, 15, something like that. And it's like, yeah, each one of those is like another little, it's something that's logged experience, it's lived experience, and it's it kind of brings me to my last point: is there's patience involved in this, and it's attrition, because when you get to a certain point and you start just stacking up these things, and you understand the things that you're doing in the present are allowing you to become a better practitioner, and you can look and be like, oh wow, this situation really taught me how to do X, Y, or Z. Really taught me how to communicate with this demographic of person. I never had a client that was older before. I worked mostly with young people, and this is my situation right now. I feel way more confident in talking to people who aren't athletes now than I were when I did, and that's going to change my value. Right? Where it's like, it was a blind spot. I was made aware of it. I worked to correct it. Now on the other side of it, I'm a better, more robust practitioner because of it. Yeah. That's worth something on the open market, even, 10 years into practice and almost 20 years in the industry. So it's like, you need to, one, be realistic with the value that you can provide, and don't price yourself out of experience. That's something that I would never, and even now, one of my biggest fears when quoting a client and working in some sort of capacity is quoting myself out of the opportunity.
Yeah.
And even now I'm still reluctant with, like, that's a lot of money. I really hope they don't object to it, because it'd be really cool to get the experience. Yeah. And I see people early in their career setting their prices to like year 10 prices. And it's like, look at literally any other field, right? Look at a corporate structure in any other field where you're like a lawyer. They're a third year lawyer, and you're comparing to partners in a law firm. It's like, what? This is just not how it works, man. Like, you have to run these cases. You have to get results. You have to be able to show, you have to be able to show your value. And then if you're doing that, you'll build the right, and because you'll build the right by not pricing yourself out of the requisite opportunities that are in front of you, or the next olive branch that you can grab to then upskill and then upcharge. And it's just like, I think the thing that's interesting about the fitness community and what we do is our ability to tell the story alongside it. A lot of people are telling stories alongside nothing. There's no experience. They're just talking shit. And it's like, look, that'll get you to a certain place, but that place will be so painful because you won't know how to get further. It's like, tell the story of the shit that you're doing, but you're not doing anything. Exactly. Go fucking do something that backs the value that you proclaim to be able to bring to people. Then you could charge for it.
Yeah. I think a really good representation of that is medical doctors and what they have to go through in residency. I don't think that there's a profession on this earth that has to work harder than a medical student getting their diploma, getting their degree, getting their license, and making it through their residencies. And I've seen like what medical doctors make in residencies, and it's less than personal trainers. It's like 50, 60K a year, and you're working like 12 hours a day for like 3 years. So that's a really good example of that. It's like, if you want to make it through this tunnel, you have to go through the dark part before you get to the light part, right? And you have to grind and you have to earn your value, because the thing about you made a point earlier on is like, we took the time, we took on the debt, and we went through the experience of getting a degree. And it's an unconventional way to get into the training industry, which I think both you and I largely operate in. That's when people ask me what I do, I tell them that I'm a trainer, even though I have a chiropractic degree, I have a chiropractic license. So it's not the conventional way of going about that. But in my pursuit of going to chiropractic school, it was always to learn more about training, like 100%. And it's like, in a selfish way. And I think a really good point to make out of this is that before someone else gives you the shot, like, give yourself the shot. Whatever you want to be your specialty, whatever you want to do your metaphorical residency in, do it on yourself first. Like, that's where I've gotten the majority of my experience is I've put myself through it. There's very rarely training programs that I have or styles of training that I'll program for someone else that I haven't gone through myself. And that's something that I stand by 100% of the time. And like, it parallels the sentiment that you just said in like pricing yourself out of opportunities. I recently took on, this, and I'm sure it was a similar experience for you, someone that I charged way more than I've ever charged anyone. But it is that conversation of, do I have the experience and can I provide the level of value to charge this price tag? And I was 100% confident that I could do that. And so when I was putting a program together for this person, I went through it for 2 weeks straight, the exact program, and I modified it after every single session to make sure that it was the perfect program that I could provide to this person at the specific time. And this is just 1 week of program. This isn't like a set it, forget it type of program, but that's the level of attention to detail that I put into this. And I'm like, all right, I'm confident that this is going to be worth the value, and I can provide a service that is going to be worth the value that this price represents. And I went through it, worked with this person for a week. At the end of the week, I got this, nice, long, heartfelt text message of, thank you for your professionalism. This is an incredible degree of service. Like, I'm so happy that we did this. And like, shit like that makes it all worth it. Because yes, I feel the same way in these situations. Like, I don't want to charge so much that I don't get the opportunity to do this. Because for me, the experience of doing something there's so much more value on my side of that than the monetary aspect of it. Like, yes, you have to make a living. Yes, you have to pay your bills. But now I have this thing on my resume that's like, okay, I've done this and I've done very well at this. So I know that this is something that I could say with even more confidence next time around, that yes, this is something I do and this is a service that I provide and I could do very well at it. But that started with me to me. It's like, all right, if this is what this is going to be, like, how does it look? How can I design this? How can I make sure that this is exactly what it needs to be? And I'm going to work on that with myself before I do it with someone else. And that's anyone who's getting into the training field. Like, first off, you better be fucking training. Like, you better be in the gym. You better know what you're doing. But from that, like, do different things. Like, I think we all started out here. When I started training, everyone I started training did the same shit I did. And I learned really quickly that's not effective. That's because there's not many people that have the experience and the capabilities and give as many fucks about this as I do, especially someone that's going to hire a trainer to tell them what to do. So you need to understand, like, who is this client? What do they need? And then how can I make this the appropriate thing for them? And that's the most nerve-wracking thing for me every time I see a client, even at this point in my career. It's like, all right, the first session this is where I'm going to either form a relationship or they're going to decide that they don't want to work with me. So I need to make this as accurate as possible. And I need to make sure that this matches the level of service that they want to get. And not even does that, but it exceeds their expectations around what they were getting themselves into. And the more accurately you can assign a stimulus to that person, that's going to be the thing that gets them to get that buy-in. But that starts with you. That starts with you kind of eating shit and experimenting and doing this yourself so that you understand the product that you're delivering and you can communicate that and you can assign that to the right person at the right time. And then once you have that experience, well, actually even before that, like the part about this that makes you more valuable over time is that it's uncomfortable to do things that you haven't done before. And you're never going to get anywhere in life if you stay in the area in which you're very comfortable. And even though, like, you, myself, the people that we work with, we're all very good at what we do, I make myself uncomfortable in this profession as often as I get the opportunity to. As I work with clients that I don't know if I can help them, or they're getting me outside of my comfort zone of things that I've done before. And that's the part, the first off, the willingness to be uncomfortable, and then the grit or the motivation or the determination that it takes to be able to not only get uncomfortable, but do the learning that you have to do to be able to exceed expectations in a position that you're uncomfortable in maybe the entire time, and be able to deliver a high level of value in that without showing how uncomfortable you are. That's what's going to get you to continually grow your value over time.
Yeah, the ability to sit in it is like so massively understated, and it really comes down to patience. And I think especially when we're dealing with injuries primarily, or goals that people are trying to achieve in any aspect, things take time. Now, your job is to make that time frame, like you said, less, or that goal within that time frame be far exceeded, and that's where the value is. But you gotta wait until judgment day, right? And I think one of the things you get good at is when things go, and this is what experience affords you, and this is where you should look out for as the major opportunities. Like, these are quite literally the silver linings, is your ability to sit in that discomfort, which is usually going to come from your client is today not looking like they're reaching their goal, like you're not being able to provide the service. That's the discomfort you should be looking for. And it's going to sound paradoxical, and maybe in some ways it is, where it's like, I want to find use cases that are so difficult, right? Like, one of the things that I find that is almost a prerequisite of people I work with now is, oh, we've tried everyone. It's like, that's what you want to hear. And because that's when you're like, fuck, okay, like, there's every part of my practice is going to get tested, from technical to tactical. I'm going to be tested because this person's prior experience has trained them to fail. So I need to reset that prior so that their posterior, that they learn to be better. And that's a tough situation to be in. And look, when you get good at this and you start dealing in time intervals, you're going to have days. They're going to have days where, like, they're going to second guess your ability to get results, or their ability, like, oh, my body is, the number of times I've heard, like, like, my body's different. And like, when I first heard it from people, I was like, shut the fuck up. What do you know? What do you know? You don't fucking know anything. That's why I'm here. And now, it's like, look, 3 days from now, this person's going to be fucking dancing, and they're going to be so happy. And I just need to sit with this and almost like learn how to adapt in that situation, because there's no one size fits all to show up in those situations for people. But if you put yourself in those situations enough times and can sit and not panic, I know some people that just like, okay, well, like, the Tim over here, like, maybe we can talk to Tim. Fuck off, Tim. We don't need to talk to Tim. You just had a bad day. And progress isn't linear. And we all know that. But when it's money on the line, it's transactional. Every day they think they're showing up. And it's like, no, you paid me for a goal, an end goal, and it's not the end. We'll get to the end. And this is a part of it. So like being able to sit in it and be patient and then show up for your people the way they need you to, like just calm as fuck. Right? Like, don't freak out. Man, the number of people I talk to that just freak the fuck out. It's like, dude, freak out in your own head. Freak out in my own head all the time. And then when I say something, it's like, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Of course. That's probably a phrase I use every day in my practice. Of course. What'd you expect? Expect this to be easy? You've been at how many people before to try and fix this problem? It's like, look, you're going to have days like this. It's fine. Is your arm still on your body? Yes. Then we got a fighting chance, right? Like, we've been here before. Look, pain is this multidimensional, whatever it is. And then they show up, how you feeling? I feel really good. Great. And guess what? Don't freak out. And because I see people do that too, where things are going too well and the dab up gets a little too emphatic. And then in 4 days from now, they're back in the hole again. And you got some explaining to do. It's like, I said this once at a level 1 that we taught in Burlington, I think. It was like our final, wrap up of the weekend. And it was kind of, I don't usually have, I wing it every single time. You know this, you've been working with me for fucking 14 years. But it was one that I started to tend to as like a closing statement and it is the only sentiment that I've ever deliberately gone out of my way to parrot in seminars. Seminars, you get a feel for the room, you get a feel for the people, but it was one that I felt was really fitting at the end of every seminar that we did. And it landed really well and it echoes still. And I should probably bring it back. And that was be cool. Do you remember be cool?
Oh yeah. I knew it before you said it.
Did you? Oh, shucks. But it's like that. Look, something goes wrong, be cool. Something goes right, be cool. That's what cool is, right? When you're a kid, you're like, oh God, he's so cool. Like, I want to be cool. Like, what is it? It's like, chill the fuck out. That's your job. Honestly, I think if you're a trainer, you're a coach, or a clinician, you're trying to, you got to be cool. You're getting paid to be this level head, this sound voice in the room. That it's like, there's that old parable that like, we'll see. Is it bad? We'll see. Is it good? We'll see. Right? Like that's wisdom. Like that's the real shit. I saw John. You want to talk wisdom? John Bond posted something once. He was probably one of the wiser men that I've ever met, and it said, knowledge is knowing tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Right? And I thought that was really emblematic of where a lot of people go wrong. Right? We're in this industry that seems to be a race to accumulate the most amount of knowledge, but it's not where a lot of the cash value of what we do is. It's in the wisdom, right? You can know all the lines of pull in the world. The wisdom is knowing that your client maybe doesn't give a fuck, right? So it's an interesting slant to take, but I think it's at the end of the day, if I think about where, if I had to summarize where value comes from in our space, it's like, be cool. And where does that come from? It's like, well, it comes from being here before, learning how to sit in that discomfort, learning how to communicate your way through these problems based off of prior experiences. So it's something where I just think we're looking in the wrong places when it comes to building value to justify charging more money and making more money in this industry. And it's just it's not as direct as you think. When you pay attention in the right places and you put your efforts in the right places, all of a sudden these opportunities start to open up for you. And it's, I think a lot of trainers would be best to sort of heed the warning that, look, if you want this to be your career, you're in this for the long haul, right? If you have an intonation that you're going to oh man, if I don't do this by this time, I'm going to go what? Be a line cook? What are you going to do? What you know what I mean? It's you gotta strap in, man. You gotta be patient. You're going to be doing this for 20, 30 years, 30, 40 years. Be patient, be cool. that's for me where, that's the root of where your value comes from.
Yeah, I love it. It's, man, there's so many things that go into it. And like you said, it's just such an indirect line. And something I find happening more and more, the more experience I have, is I actually question my value. And not necessarily because I don't think it's there. It's because I'm able to solve these problems very easily. And I think sometimes maybe because of everything in my life has been so hard earned that I get into situations. I'm like, oh yeah, that's easy. Do this, this, and this, and it solves the problem. And that's experience. That's because I've seen these things a million times. And I don't necessarily think that I question my value in terms of like I'm becoming less valuable, or I'm not worth what I charge, or I can't provide value to clients. It's just because it feels too easy sometimes. And once you get to a place like that where you're actually questioning if you're providing the value, I think that's where the conversation starts, right? That's where you can start being like, okay, like I can go above and beyond and solve this problem very quickly. Now, how do I increase my value from here? I've already exceeded expectations. What is the next thing that I could do in a situation like this to make myself more valuable or continue to exceed expectations? And that's the never ending pursuit that this is in my mind. The job is never going to be done. I'm never going to be good enough at my job that I can just sit back and be like, oh yeah, this, and this. And that's, for me, it's never the pursuit of knowing the answer. It's always the pursuit of finding more ways to get to the answer, or different approaches, or disproving things that I might have thought were true. And that's when you have that self-assessment, or if you can retroactively look at something and pick it apart and say, all right, this went well because of X, Y, and Z. It went poorly because of ABC. Less ABC, more XYZ. And you just refine your crafts every single time. Every single client you're in front of, every single set of an exercise in your workout, that's an opportunity to learn something new or focus on something different that could help you solve that problem better in the future, or solve a problem that you didn't know existed yet, or your clients didn't know existed. So the experience thing it's an interesting conversation, because the more of it that you have, then that's when you just go deeper and deeper and deeper, because you don't have to worry about the things that overwhelm maybe a new trainer. Is like, oh no, how do I communicate X, Y, and Z? Or am I saying the right words at the right time? It's like, no, you've already got that stuff. Now let's really refine the craft, and let's refine your knowledge, your understanding. Let's get deeper on this thing. Let's see if we can get better at working with this population. And it's something that, if this is a career for you, it always feels like you're just getting started, and you're probably always going to question yourself, as you should, because you can always be better. I don't care who it is, how long you've been doing this, who you've worked with, you can always be better.
Yeah, and I think the putting into place improvements across the board in what entails to be a coach is different than imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fact that you could always be better shouldn't. I don't understand imposter syndrome at all. And I don't want to be another talking head like, Marshall, please don't clip this. I don't want this to be a thing that just floats around the internet. I find it really, because it may be a more nuanced conversation than I give it credence to, but I just see people having this like motivation versus discipline, or in this case, imposter syndrome does exist, it doesn't exist. I personally haven't ever dealt with it. I'm curious if you have.
To some degree, I understand it, at least. And I think imposter syndrome comes from kind of being in that uncomfortable situation that I mentioned before, being proposed a situation that you're not comfortable in, but not necessarily having the experience or the decision-making tools to be confident that you can get the outcome that is desired or needed from the situation. And I think that's where it comes from. I think imposter syndrome is a mismatch between opportunity and skill level. And I think people get that because they don't have the self-confidence that they can get the outcome that is needed from that situation.
I like that. I'm always inclined to question the worst case scenario when people come to me and they go, and I have really bad imposter syndrome. I go, what's the worst that could happen? I think for me, it's always a recalibration around failure. Like that's where when I talk to people, it's there's ultimately we're just specks of dust in a simulation that's running on some big rock somewhere, and so it's like, well, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Like because I think one of the things that the hyper intellectualization of our field, the content, echo chamber of social media has done is it's put a precedent, or it's put precedent on, or precedence on being right over helping people. And I think that's somewhat of a fool's errand in what is a service-based industry. And the biggest fear becomes being wrong. And then people feel like imposters because they're not right. And they think wrong is failure.
Mm-hmm.
How is wrong failure? Wrong is the prerequisite to learning, right? There's a difference between failure and error. And I think if you recalibrate what people think is failure as error, you realize that what you're doing is you're setting up the pretext for learning, because error is a prerequisite to learning. And I just think the social media sphere and the anxiety inducing pace, pitch, and tone, magnitude, frequency of content that inundates us, it catastrophizes error and makes people think it's failure.
Right.
And it's not. And I think when I'm talking to coaches, because one of the things that I find frustrating on behalf of people who usually proclaim to have imposter syndrome is 99% of the time people who proclaim to have imposter syndrome are really good at their job.
Yeah.
They're really good at their job. They're just not good at the sitting in it part. They're not good
Right.
at sitting in these uncomfortable situations. And it's like, yeah, look, man, what you're sitting in isn't failure. You're sitting in error. You're sitting in opportunity to learn. And when
Right.
you look at it like that, you seek it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's exactly the core of it. Is it's coming from a place of comfort, of someone that is good at what they do, but they're unable to be uncomfortable and be in a position where they know that they don't know. And that's what it is. It's an excuse for self-sabotage, is that I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to talk myself out of the opportunity. But I 100% agree. It's if you're in a position where you feel like you have imposter syndrome, that is such an opportunity for you to add experience to your repertoire and conquer something that you're not confident in. And that is exactly what you should be seeking out if you want to be a professional, or if you want this to be something that you do for a long period of time. If you avoid those, then you're just succumbing to your fears. And no one has ever done anything great or notable by making decisions out of fear, right? You have to be courageous, and you have to make decisions that you're unsure of the outcome. And when you're unsure of the outcome, but you're in a position where you are, whether it's being paid or someone is counting on you to get them a desired outcome, you're going to go above and beyond. You're going to do everything that you can to accomplish that. And if you're not, then maybe you shouldn't put yourself in those situations, and you should go be an employee for someone else. But if it's something that, you really care about this and you want to be as good as you can, you're going to figure it out.
Yeah, look, the thing that I usually end up telling people that are trainers that don't like sitting in that discomfort is like, you can either live with the discomfort of, potentially being wrong and learning from it, or you can live with the discomfort of knowing that you're going to be a 50-year-old trainer with a ponytail. Because something about guys with ponytails in their 50s are always the guys who just run the same equation from when they first started. So it's like, you're either going to grow or grow your hair. And one of the two is like, I would suggest, metaphysical growth, because, whenever I come across a old trainer with a ponytail, it's always a really annoying conversation. But look, yeah, hey, it's only difficult if you make it difficult, right? Like at the end of the day, if you know how to put this career into perspective. And I think one of the things, and I don't want to circle the wagon too many times on this, is doing it in person allows you to see the opportunities to get better. Because I think in-person coaches make the best online coaches because they know all of the different corners of the service that are liable to improve, right? The communication piece, like, the emails you send. Should I do Loom videos? Should I talk? Should I get a better microphone or whatever? Should I do it over WhatsApp? What method of communication do they like? Do they like to text? How would I do that? Should I start making some draft templates that I keep in my notes for text? Do they like, if I send them a fucking written letter? Oh, what do I do for their birthday every year? Should I send them something for that? Like, next time you get an iPhone, and you're not a guy that keeps the boxes, are you?
No.
Yeah, but you know these people, right? Like these people,
right?
exist,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a memorable part of the transaction. Apple realized this, but if you only did shit online, you wouldn't see all the opportunities. So one of the things, and maybe I'll close with this on my end, is like, if you're struggling in your perception, your ability to provide value, have an online business. One, maybe the struggle that you're having is exactly what you need to do. Maybe it's you're right in the position to sit and learn, but look for the opportunities to learn. I think the biggest, the breeding ground for learning just the different avenues in which you can improve your service is in real life. Get some clients in real, because you want, uncomfortable silence for me was the catalyst that I needed to start improving my training business. Was like sitting with someone, and like it would come down to, hey, this person likes art. Okay, I'm going to fucking go learn about art. And so I have something to talk, like, oh, hey, dude, I went to this, like, I go to museums. One of the reasons I started going to museums was one of my clients liked art. And I was like, okay, I fucking hate sitting in this uncomfortable silence. This guy, I only like training. They only like art. They're not going to pay me to give a fuck about training. And then I started learning, this person went out of their way to learn something about me, and now we can engage in it. Now, like, person will text me, oh, did you see this sold at auction? Like, yeah, cool, man. Like, that's everywhere. That's behind. And guess what? That makes your service 1,000 times better in the eyes of your client. So it's like, get out from behind the keyboard, grab some people in person, quality assure your business, sit in the discomfort and learn from that opportunity. And, in fucking 10, 15 years, you keep doing that, lo and behold, you'll probably be right where you want to be.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. I'd say, to sum it up for me, it's just be unconditionally curious. Like, take every opportunity that you have to learn. And like, that's a good example, the art example, but in every sort of domain that contributes to the product that you give, if you can offer any sort of value, take it. Just be curious and continue to grow in that way. And keep in mind that growth is uncomfortable. So put yourself in those positions, seek out those positions. And it's okay if you fuck it up, because the more often you do that, the more often you'll have opportunities to do that. And every time that you have an opportunity to do it, you're going to fuck it up less every single time. And that's the goal. Just fuck it up less than the last time you did it, and you're moving in the right direction. And that's it.
Love it. I'm probably going to run this back in some way, shape, or fashion in the next, because I feel like there's so much to unpack here, because I feel as if the audience that listens to RX is very technically smart, but it's the tactical stuff that I find myself consulting on most often. People DM me like, hey, I got this thing. It's like, okay, it's the social engineering behind what we do that I think really is the catalyst for most people. This isn't a Mensa roundtable meeting. We're not proving theorems. It's like this. We're in the people business first and foremost. So yeah. I like it. So we'll leave it there for the day. Appreciate everyone hanging out as per always. We'll see you guys next week.